All right, folks, welcome to Brave New North. My name is Sean Conway, coming at you live from downtown Curve Lake First Nation. It's been a minute since we've had a show, but we've got a really good one for you tonight. We've got Blake Desjarlais, who's seeking the NDP nomination in Edmonton-Griesbach. We have Dhananjai Kholi, who's running for an executive position with the federal NDP. For party president. And also we have friend of the show and perennial favorite, my friend and yours, the MPP for Toronto-Centre, Suze Morrison. So it's going to be a really, really, really exciting night. But before we get into some of that, just a bit of this and that, like make sure you're hitting the like and subscribe. And I've been told that there's a bell icon you can press so that anytime we do one of these things, it'll pop up on your devices and your computers, and you don't miss any of the riveting conversations that we have here on the show. But before we pull into that stuff, I just want to take a moment to recognize that today in Ireland, in the Republic, is the commemoration of the Easter Rising 1916, which led to the formation of the Free Irish Republic, and that work continues today. I posted on my Twitter page the Sinn Féin commemoration in Belfast today. It's a really interesting thing, and I think over the next couple of weeks leading up to NDP convention and other things, we're talking about international solidarity, and I think it's really important that we always keep that internationalist lens on things, and we stand on the side of oppressed peoples across the world. It's very, very important here in Palestine, in Ireland, in across the globe. We've got to keep that internationalist mindset in, because it is very possible to have a good world, and we should do that. And who better to come in and talk about the work that they're doing to make a better world than Blake Desjarlais, who recently announced, I believe about a month ago, that they'd be seeking the nomination, and I believe now as a confirmed candidate in Edmonton-Griesbach. Blake Desjarlais, hi.
Tansei, Sean, hello everyone. Thanks so much for inviting me to the show, and I really look forward to getting to know you and your viewers, and hopefully I can share a bit about myself as well.
Bonjour, welcome for coming. It's always nice to connect with an Indigenous person, yourself, your Bush Métis, and it's always interesting for me to meet someone who wants to work in elected politics, being an Indigenous person. So I won't ask you that question right off the bat, but maybe just first, just tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to where you are now.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I really want to be able to preface that by acknowledging all my teachers and the people who really made me who I am today, and some of them may be watching the show today. And thanks so much for all your leadership and your guidance and wisdom. But a little bit about myself is I was born in Edmonton, Alberta, here where I'm at on Treaty 6 territory and land that's special and significant to the Métis people. However, it's not where I was raised. So my story actually begins not at that point, but before then. And for many Indigenous people, it's very similar. Our stories are just intertwined with this legacy in Canada, with this history, this legal and political history that defines who we are, says where we are, says where we're allowed to be born, tells us when we can be born, tells us that there are certain points when or where we should live. And so our lives, I think, have a special kind of arc to them as Indigenous people, because there's always been this force to push us and guide us as Indigenous people to the particular destination that others want for us, not ourselves. But I was part of a story of how we got to break that kind of cycle. And so, of course, you're well aware, Sean, of the terribly atrocious things that Canada has done in its short 150 years, not or including but not excluding many stories, but some of the big ones, of course, that we hold so common in our nations is the history of residential school, the history of 60 Scoop, and the history of the ongoing stealing of our children through the children welfare system, the child and family services system. So I found my way as a young person, born right into the conflict that was the intergenerational 60s scoop. And so my birth mother, her name was Brenda, and she lived her entire life in Edmonton, other than when she was a child, of course. She lived in the bush, just like many of us did at that point. And the RCMP and the Alberta Social Services came in and said unfit parents, so common across the communities. And the point they get to what is an unfit parent, just for some folks who may not know some of the how fast someone can come to that conclusion, is these reserves and Métis settlements where I'm from a Métis settlement, extremely underfunded, only public housing, shortage of housing, no clean water, lots of issues. And so when you come into that setting, it's really easy to say that child has no clean water because there's no infrastructure for it. There's been no plans for it. And so it's easy to abduct my mother. They had so many excuses to point to. She was taken and unfortunately lived a terribly traumatic life, being separated from her siblings, being separated from her parents from a very young age, to the time she aged out. And for those listeners who may not know, what we say is aging out is when someone from the child and family services or foster homes, when they enter the system and they reach the maximum age allowable for state protection under that system, they have to exit it. And so she aged out. She was in the system for that entire time until she aged out. And all too commonly, especially as an Indigenous woman, she went onto the streets. And these are communities that are often totally, we totally neglect in so many ways. Their social economic status, all the way to things like even their basic presence and survival. And so she lived that life and survived that hard life through, she was a sex worker. She through that had to cope with drugs, cope with her trauma with drugs, and it developed into an addiction. But she was a survivor, and like so many of our people were survivors, and she survived those tough streets and was able to give birth to me. I was sent to the University of Alberta Hospital in an ambulance. She was found, and she was underwent an emergency C-section to save my life as a very small baby. And from that moment on, it was a race against the time. Race against the RCMP. Who was going to get to me first as a baby? Was it going to be the RCMP, or was it going to be a family member? And so luckily enough, Brenda had the strength to call the mother who raised me, her sister. Her name was Grace, from the nearby Métis settlement in Fishing Lake. It was the oldest sister. So she phoned her and said, Grace, you got to get over here. You know, I'm having this baby and it's happening now. And she spent the last little dollar she had on a bus ticket that got her out of the bush all the way to Edmonton, where she met me at the University Hospital. I'm so grateful for that she took that bus trip and she even answered the phone. Like, it's so many miracles happened. But she got there, and thankfully enough, she was met by one of the very few and rare social workers that said, you know, you don't look like someone who would be a drug addict. You don't look like someone who this kid can't go home with, Grace, what she told her. And I think we can have a real serious fight for this one. The doctors and nurses, many folks said, you're never going to happen. You know, this woman came right off the street. This baby's going to be taken. They told my mom this list of things that the court would need, and she went through them. She checked every single one of them. The terrible bureaucratic process that is this wall for Indigenous people to get past, she got past. And the judge, months later, granted custody to the mother who raised me, Grace, after a legal battle with the state. But that just goes to show a little bit about where I'm from, with the values I have, and just my deep sense of reciprocity, which guides me today and is largely the reason I want to serve the people of Edmonton, Griesba, the people on 118th Avenue, the people like my birth mom who suffered that life, to give them that dignity back, to say, look, we survived, we got out of it, and we're still here.
No, it's just, I think your story is so emblematic of so many of the struggles of regular people and people within our community. You know, we are survivors, and it's such a powerful place to come by and to come out of it the way that you did, with the spirit of public service and wanting to give back. And that was my own story with having my own troubles when I was younger, and coming out of it on the end and say, well, hey, wait a minute. I had people along the way. I had teachers along the way or people in my life and community members, activists that inspired me, I want to do what they do. And that's a really powerful place to be for community organizing or for wanting to give back. So thanks for bringing that experience into your journey. Blake, why don't you tell us a little bit about the riding of Edmonton Griesbach? We have a viewership that's scattered all over Canada, and I don't think that the people that I know that are predominantly from Ontario, Quebec, Manitoba, they don't really know what Edmonton looks like. And truthfully, it's been a year or two since I've been to Edmonton. So why don't you tell us about the riding and the people that live there?
Well, the people who live in our district in Edmonton Griesbach are the most generous people. First of all, we live in one of the poorest districts in all of Alberta. We have the highest child poverty rate in all of Alberta. Our kids in this district are going without when many other people can. So that's the biggest emergency is our children need help and they need out of poverty now. Not yesterday, not 10 years ago, but today. It's only getting worse. Another big, beautiful thing we're proud of is our diversity. We're one of the most diverse districts in terms of ethnic origin. And that's something that is celebrated up and down Edmonton, but also especially in our district because we're home to 118th Ave. There's festivals up and down, huge cultural festivals up and down the avenue. In almost every community that's a neighborhood in the district. But another aspect that paints our district is the rise of hate motivated attacks and the rise of systemic racism in a really overt way. And of course, racism in Canada is interwoven within these systems, within these within the language, within the most basic foundations of our society. And people sometimes don't see it. And they take the protections that they are granted for granted. For example, many folks feel as though they can walk down the street and have no problem at all. Go get your groceries, go get your kids, whatever. But many of our folks, especially our Black Muslim women of color, especially our Asian Canadian family and friends, those folks are being targeted in our community in an intolerable way. And we have to find ways to stick up to it. And these are new challenges. I mean, these are not new challenges. However, they're in new scenarios and in new environments. So we need to adapt. We need to make sure that our community people feel safe and that they're not scared because what we have built here in Edmonton Griesbach is so special for the entire province. I think for much of the country, what they think about Alberta is that it's this big old conservative honky town that all we do is go in there, pump oil out, and then we just sell it all over the world and destroy the environment. When many Albertans, especially the people in Edmonton Griesbach, couldn't be any more different from that stereotype. These people are environmentally conscious. They're here to protect our environment. We're here to protect our waterways. We're here to protect the species that make our ecology. But they're also home to the small businesses of Edmonton, the mom and pop shops that have been here for 30, 40 years. Some of them are brand new, 1 or 2 years, and they're living a life where they fled from somewhere much more difficult. But wherever folks find their start in our community, they often see that the community will lift them up through those hardest times. When other communities might kick them out, we won't. We're here to help that person out from the ground up. And if that means folks like my birth mother, Brenda, who lived on the street as a sex worker and is making sure that they have food on the table, that's a reality that people have to live with. And when those people need dignity. And so I think that's the fight that we're going to have for Edmonton Griesbach is to try to get its dignity back and try to really get the true voices of the people who really call Edmonton home present in Ottawa. Because from what I've seen and the reason I'm running is because I've heard too much of this blue wall. We can't get past it, and the real voices of Albertans can't get out. Other than, of course, Heather McPherson, riding just south of me. She's been a wonderful member of Parliament advocating for Alberta hard, and she's a huge supporter for us and our campaign. And we really do think that now is the time. Edmontonians want change. They're sick and tired of getting beat up from our provincial government. They're sick and tired of getting beat up from our weak conservative representatives here in Alberta. And our feeling is though now is the time that we stick up for ourselves and make sure that our allies across the country know we're here and see us, that we are progressives. We are fighting a tough fight here in the middle of Alberta, and we need as much support as possible.
Thanks for sharing so much. I love Alberta. and I've spent a lot of time in Alberta, in Edmonton, through Calgary, south of Calgary, in the rodeo lands and ranch lands down, down the Cowboy Trail. I used to play in country music bands, and we would play all
Oh, right
over,
on. Yeah.
playing at the Stampede, playing in, Nen and Claresholm and Stavely and down Pincher Creek and up all over. I just love Alberta. And Alberta is a fantastic place. I think that does get a bad rap in some circles, but it is an amazing, amazing place. It's one of the most beautiful places in Canada. And I'm always a little bit jealous of people that live there, because it's such a nice place to live, and the people are very kind, and it's a very nice place.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
The best
so
place
I,
in the world. It has mountains on one side of us. You can escape in 3 hours from Edmonton. You can see the mountains. On the other side, you'd see the fields until the edge of the sky, and everything in between is this beautiful, almost like blue dome. You have this sky, this huge prairie sky. If you ever have a chance, for your viewers, if they haven't visited Alberta, please visit. We're so beautiful, this province, and I really hope you can come back out again, Sean, and play some music. That sounds awesome. I'm a traditional Red River jigger, so I'm a pretty
Hey,
good
right
jigger. So
on.
hopefully, maybe you got a fiddle there somewhere.
It's been a while since I've played a fiddle. My great grandfather used to play fiddle, and he was pretty good.
Oh,
Um,
jealous.
but yeah, no, I've had great times in Edmonton, playing in the clubs and hanging around. And I'm just looking at our comments here in the chat. Maybe we'll do a country music edition. We'll get some fiddling and steel guitars and everything out. That'll be a bit of a culture shock for some folks, but
Yeah.
I had a great time.
Yeah, someone's like, Sean, what's going on here? What happened to the show? No,
Yeah,
no.
no. So we were gonna talk about public policy, but it turned into a country music show.
Yeah.
So Blake, what are some of the big issues? You mentioned funding for child welfare, and ensuring that children are living in poverty, rise in hate crimes and things like that. What are some of the other policies that you really want to take to the door in the riding, and what is it that you want to connect with on a policy level with the people that live in your riding? What do you think we can bring to them?
Well, I think the biggest things is really what they're asking for, and what I've heard so far. And we're going to continue listening to folks, and we're going to continue to get out in the community in any which way we can. It's tough right now because of
Yeah.
COVID, but we're going to be there to listen to what folks are saying. And what we've heard so far is they really need help on the economic side of things. That their paychecks are too low, rent is still too high, food is too much, and drugs are just expensive. And so, how do we make sure that we reduce these? And I mean by prescription drugs. How do we make sure that pharmacare, for example, is something that's a top priority? We keep saying it. Liberals keep talking about it,
Hmm.
and we were probably kids, me and you, when the Liberals probably first promised this. Said, "Yep, pharmacare, let's do it." And look, we're now having to run for office to make sure this happens. And so that has to happen. And our seniors and our elders, they can't afford it. They built a social safety net. They paid their taxes. They paid a lot into this country. Some even went participate in the war for a social safety net that they're not even benefiting from. And so, how do we expand it to make sure that drugs are included? Something so critical to their health. My mom, for example, she's on an oxygen machine. She's a tough woman, tough as nails. She worked her whole life. Single mom. She was widowed when she was raising me. She's tough as nails, but she needs oxygen now in her late life, in her 70s. She now needs to go on oxygen tank. Her drug company just said $200 a month. It went from $25 a tank to $200 a month. She can't afford that. She's on a pension. These things are going to break our seniors, break our elders, and we just can't continue it. So that's a big principle for me, is supporting actual action on pharmacare or any kind of initiative that will reduce the overall cost of our healthcare system. Which kind of brings me to my next point, which is, how do we prevent those things from happening? How do we prevent someone from going into a hospital seeking expensive medical treatment? Because often enough, it's one thing to prop up this really big health institution and take care of all the symptoms of society.
Yeah.
But what we need to start thinking about is how we create a society that transitions to prevention and better living. I think, Sean, me and you know almost best. Indigenous people know best what it takes to really build a community back up once it's been shattered and shattered and shattered. The people of Edmonton, Griesba are folks who've had a tough go, especially since the 2008 oil crisis, when prices hit an all-time low and folks went bankrupt. The economy blew up here in Alberta, and folks had to really stop and think and say, whoa, this oil business might not go forever. This promise from the 70s, it's coming to a screeching halt. Where's our divestment? Where's our diversity? And where's our opportunity? And that's a question that's still up in the air nearly 15 years later. And that's something we need to offer them as well, is a real plan for green jobs. Alberta is going to always be an energy province. It's always going to be a province that makes sure that the rest of Canadians are getting the power that they need. We're a huge province. We can supply the energy demands. But what's important for Albertans to understand, what's important, and I can say this because I come from the tar sands. I come directly from the area where it used to benefit from oil, no longer does, and now we're left with a big mess to clean up. A huge regret in many ways. But what folks have to realize is we do need to transition to a better energy economy. We have the skills here. We have the people who are energy experts. It's not going to take much for us to take the bull by the horns and build an economy that's going to work for us, and try to end the battle, which is oil forever, because that's not going to happen. Oil forever is just not going to happen. It's just impossible. And so I think just some of those issues, so healthcare, anti-poverty, anti-racism, and rebuilding our economy and transitioning to a diversified Alberta, a better Alberta, jobs for everyone, skill jobs for everyone, is something that I haven't heard one person who wears a blue shirt in Alberta stand up and say yet. So I'm here to say it.
No, I think I think those are great things to go on, especially in the riding, and it's really true. I think there's a lot of opportunity for Albertans to take advantage of new technologies and out of different resources to divest away from the tar sands, namely around geothermal, and we've seen a lot of that happening, and that's, I think, is a huge opportunity for a lot of those workers, and as well as for Alberta itself, the province, to get in there and start building back a bit of the old Alberta advantage, because right now it's not going so good. So I think that those are great things. And are you doing any door-to-door campaigning there yet, or it's a little too wild?
Well, what we've heard so far is that it's especially looking at variants these days, it's too dangerous for us to be risking the lives of our fellow neighbors and folks like that by going door to door. But that doesn't mean we're not going to not see them. Those folks who, for example, reach out to us via text or email or any of our social medias, we're able to actually come to your house and socially distance, with your permission, of course. We won't be going in your house, but we can talk to you from a great distance and share with you some of our ideas, maybe from your deck or your porch, and we can be from the sidewalk. There's have been many of those, for example, if folks want to learn more or meet me. But we're also hosting mini virtual neighborhood meetings where local neighborhood leaders are coming to us and saying, there's 10 people on my block who really want to hear from you, Blake, and who are really interested in building a better Alberta. Can you come talk to us? And so my team, we get in touch with them. We get out a Zoom link, and we really have fun with them. We really try to make sure that these online events, although they seem far away, that we can close a distance with some humor, some casual discussion, and we all even have a little snack usually, and try to talk about some policies. And it's been awesome so far. But I really do miss the opportunity of seeing folks face to face. And Sean, I really hope you can come back to Alberta. I'll feed you some neck bones. We have this wonderful place down 118th. You're gonna love it, called TP Treats. And if TP Treats are listening, shout out to you folks. It's a great local Indigenous cuisine place that you're gonna have to get on your show here sometime and talk about the wonderful work they're doing.
Are you telling me that there's a restaurant in your riding that sells neck bones?
It sells neck bones, Sean. I had some this last weekend. I phoned them, and they're like, well, how many do you want? And I was like, well, how many can I get? And then they said, well, we could probably make this many. And so I bought 5 boxes of their special on Saturday. And there's only 3 of us, but you can't stop once you start neck bones.
No, it's That's a trip.
Yeah, you
No,
have to.
I always think it's funny, when people know the kind of things that we eat in the communities growing up. Like, one of the things that we always used to have was the bass head soup.
Oh yeah.
So just the head and eyes of the fish with the spine and its soup.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
was
that's my
always a
favorite.
trip. Yeah, I love that stuff. It's like total soul food. Um, I'm gonna share your Twitter. So if everyone can follow Blake on Twitter at Desjarlais Blake, I've got the link up there, and I'm going to pull up your link tree in for the comments here. So folks, give a shout out on the social media to Blake. Blake's doing some great work out in the community. I think it's going to be a great representative in Edmonton, Griesbach. Um, it's a doable riding for the NDP. It really, really is. It was one that was on my list for the last couple of election cycles of a riding to watch for the NDP in Western Canada, and I think you're going to have a really good time. Are you enjoying being a candidate?
Oh, definitely. Just the fact that folks they feed me so much energy, I guess is the thing.
Yeah.
Is I really thought when I started this it was gonna be this like throwing a cable over a building and climbing the whole way up by myself. But what I really found out was I threw the cable and folks lifted me up and
Oh,
really
that's
wanted
great.
change. They really wanted a representative that was going to be there for them and listen to them. And I'm no superhero. I'm just a regular fella working for Aboriginal people my whole life and found a way to represent more than just our people and brought to the table the values that our people have and between and our people have some of the best values. You talked about some of this in your last show with Saul about we make sure everyone has a voice. And
Yeah.
you said that, and that really resonates. And I can't say more of that. Aboriginal representatives, we listen to every single voice, and that's honest truth. Sean, you're an Aboriginal leader. You know that you listen to every single person. Sometimes they're mad, sometimes
Yep.
they're happy, but you listen. And I think that's what the community in Edmonton Griesbach needs now is someone that will end the division and bring the community back together and start working on the things that really matter, ending child poverty, ending systemic racism, rebuilding a new diversified economy, good jobs, just the things that communities need to thrive. And we're almost there. And I do think Edmonton Griesbach, we're going to make it. And one more shout out, if I can, there's in my link tree, if you shared that, there's this wonderful project by some wonderful Esqueo, some Native women in my district who are gathering at St. Faith's Church weekly, trying to raise money to make sure they can buy the materials necessary so that they can sew red dresses for the red ribbon skirt event that we will be hosting in our province's capital on May 5th for the National Day of Remembrance. It's in the link tree. If you can donate 10, $20 to these wonderful group of grassroots women who are doing this volunteer, who are making sure that our women are remembered, who are making sure that our community is recognizing this and standing up against missing and murdered Indigenous women and Two-Spirit folks. Please, it's a wonderful cause. And if you have some pennies, you can donate to my campaign after that.
Yeah, I just shared the link to the fundraiser, the Red Ribbon Skirt Project. I'll definitely donate when we're done tonight. It's super important work to do in the community. So everyone listening in, check out the GoFundMe. I put it in the link there, and let's get some donations into that. And if we've got a toonie or a loony left over, we'll send it over to Blake.
Woo!
Blake, thanks so much for coming on and talking and hanging out. And I believe that you're gonna hang out for the rest of the night because our next guest just showed up. So thanks again for coming on, and please hang out. We're gonna have a good time tonight. Our next guest is DJ Kholi. And DJ is running to be the president of the federal NDP at the convention coming up next week. Full disclosure, I'm a delegate, and yeah, pressure's on, DJ. But we're going to pull DJ into the stream, and we're going to have a chat about some of his ideas around the party and why he's running. So big internet welcome to DJ Kholi.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Great. How are you?
Good, good. Hey, thanks for having me, Sean. Hey, Blake, good to see you again.
Hey DJ, yeah, long time no see. Thanks so
I
much
know.
for yeah, it's been almost one day, almost
I
24
know,
hours.
24 hours. Wow.
Yeah, thanks so much for showing up at some of the nomination events this last week with some of our wonderful nominees, now official candidates, Kathleen and Heather, of course.
I was very sad that I missed yours. I've done a couple of campaigns in Alberta, and I'm very, very fond of Alberta, and I think that those are the type of places where we need to do the work, if we're actually going to be a party that represents working class folks, and so I was very sad that I missed your nomination, but I try and get out to as many of the Alberta folks as I can because you folks are doing great work out there. So yeah,
oh, thanks so much.
Yeah, it was great energy. It was great energy at Heather's meeting.
You have to come. You're with Sean. Sean, maybe you can do a road trip.
Yeah, maybe we will.
Well, for the remember when BC was happening last year, right? It was still at that point where the pandemic was still going on. I mean, it's been going on, but it was sort of in the ebb and flow portion of it. And me and two of my friends, we seriously considered, we're like, all right, if the three of us get tested and then we get in a car and we just drive across, maybe we can spend a week out there in the campaign doing some work. And then we're like, oh, well, that means 3 days driving there, 3 days driving back to do a day's worth of work. So probably not as good. So didn't end up doing that, but definitely hope to, when this happens, to try and come out to Alberta.
Yeah. Okay, DJ, thanks for coming on. DJ, you were running for federal NDP president. Hereto known from the rest of it, I'm not going to go between like Ontario NDP, federal NDP. I'm just going to say NDP, and if I mean Ontario NDP, I'll say Ontario NDP. So you're running for.
Sometimes.
There's a lot of acronyms in left-wing politics in Canada, and it's really hard to keep them all straight sometimes. So for all purposes, we'll refer to it the federal party as the NDP. DJ, you're running for president of the NDP. You're a longtime organizer and activist for the party. For those that don't know, who are just tuning in, why don't you tell the folks about yourself and some of the things that you want to bring to the party?
Sure. I currently work at the United Steelworkers. I work out of our national office supporting our districts in the work that they do building our labor movement. I've been there for about 2 years now. And before that, as you mentioned, Sean, I was at the Ontario NDP. I was there for actually almost a decade. And the fun thing I always like to say is that no matter what your actual title is at the party, you end up doing everything. So even though I was the organizer for the party, fundraising support, candidate search, little bit of everything. And so I spent almost a decade there. And I was always the stuff that I always enjoyed doing was in field. I've done campaigns now in Alberta, in BC, in Ontario, municipally, federally, provincially, and I think, and that's actually one of the reasons why I'm running, is because I think what we need in that position is somebody who's an organizer, right? We need somebody who's going to be willing to just roll up their sleeves and actually do the work, right? I've been staff, and I've many times been on the side where folks up there are saying, "Oh, we're going to do this," and I'm there, and I'm like, "Well, I'm already working 18 hours a week. 18 hours a day. I'm not sure when. Maybe 3 years from now, I have an appointment when I have a space when I can do some of this work." So I'm committed to this idea that if I have ideas and proposals, I want to actually do the work to build them, right? And it all comes around this idea that the president of the party, it is technically an administrative job, right? Like you are on the administrative side of things, but the way I see the job is that you're responsible for building the scaffolding that'll help get us elected in the next election. And that's really sort of where I get why I'm doing this. So, I've just actually today I dropped the first part of my platform, and then over the next few days we're going to drop a couple more pieces. But one of the things I'm really excited about is the idea of volunteer engagement and volunteer retention, right? As a party, I think one of the things we do really, really well is during a campaign, we recruit a whole bunch of volunteers, and we have great candidates like Blake who inspire folks, and we run these amazing campaigns. And then on E+1, unless we have like really strong riding associations locally, a lot of those volunteers, we unfortunately lose contact with them, right? And so I'm really interested in building out a program that kicks in on E+1, right? That helps support the ridings that have the structure to be able to do that volunteer retention. But those places where we don't have those riding associations, what can we do out of federal office to support the folks on the ground who want to stay involved, right? And that takes on a lot of different pieces. There's folks who sort of get involved in the campaign and they say, wow, this is it, right? I want to do the trainings, I want to be a VCO, I want to be a manager. And then there's folks who don't want to commit that much, and I think we as a party need to make sure that we're finding space for everybody. I'm obviously biased because I'm a New Democrat, but I think our volunteers are different from Liberal and Tory volunteers in that our volunteers want us to win, not just for the sake of winning, right? Our volunteers want us to win because they see us almost as a means to an end, right? Like us getting elected is the path for racial justice, is the path for, for anti-poverty work, is the path for the environmental movement. And so if we know our volunteers care about issues and we know that, that there are issues that they're very passionate about, let's figure out ways to be able to connect them to other progressive groups that are out here doing that work, right? So I've got, I still need to obviously flush it out more. And the one thing I always say is I don't have all the answers. And anybody who says that they do is just, is probably not the person that you want elected. I don't have all the answers. And so I want to consult and bring more folks into the conversation. But I really think that, looking at our position within the left and sort of within the progressive movement, I would love to create a structure where we're actually reaching out to our volunteers, telling them about progressive stuff that's happening in their ridings, with their permission, of course, about issues that they care about. So if somebody tells us they care about the environment, well, let's get them out to rallies, let's get them out to protests, right? Not only does that from a very selfish perspective, it keeps them engaged and keeps them sort of engaged in lefty work, but at the same time, it also shows folks that we're not just opportunists, because we're not. We do this work because we care. And it shows folks through action, not just words, that we're actually bringing folks out to events. We're mobilizing for the issues and for the community to build, to be able to build that larger left movement. For me, I think the biggest thing that I've been thinking a lot about is where is the locus of organizing, right? And I think that local riding associations and locally is where that organizing needs to happen. I sit on Parkdale High Park CPC provincially, and in between elections, Batilla, who's our MPP, is out there canvassing. She's out there attending meetings, protests, and obviously there's a partisan spin to it, but it's about issues that people care about, right? So she's out there talking about housing. She's out there talking about anti-poverty work, and it shows the people in the community that she, as the NDP MPP, but also the NDP, are here for folks. And so if we recognize that riding associations are sort of the main locus of organizing, what can we do more or what can we do better to help our riding associations get stronger, be more independent, work with each other to really build out this movement? I got a lot of platforms, so I'm going to stop here, but I got a lot more.
I'm going to stop you right there too, because I think that's a really great way to look at the role of the NDP through volunteer recruitment and also just engagement of activists. When you take political power or activity around political organizing and put it into mutual aid networks and into community activism, it not only makes the connection between the political base and the political activity that's happening, and you focus that into the community, which is very good. You again identify the individual who is moving into mutual aid and moving into community activism. They expect a standard of the party then. and it's a great accountability measure
Mhm.
for the party. So when we are taking, the NDP, a door knocker, or just someone who wants to go to protests and however they want to be a part of the movement, we're saying, hey, it's not just us. There's also the Red Ribbon Skirt Project. There's also Food Not Bombs in my riding. There's all of these things. The One Roof Community Center in Peterborough Kawartha. All kinds of different things that are happening outside of the strictly political electoral system, where we as a party can be interacting with and giving people to, organizing around community-based issues locally, empowering riding associations, empowering people to become community leaders, to become organizers. And I think that's a really, really great piece of platform. So it's good.
And it, like, what, so I've worked for the party for a long time, and so the one thing that you will never hear me say is, like, I will never throw staff under the bus, because I know how hard those folks work, right? Like, I know it's 16, 18-hour days almost every day, most evenings, weekends. It's hilarious. It was when I moved to Steele that my wife and I joked, like, we saw each other, we were like, wow, we've seen each other a lot this summer, because it was like, wow, this is what married life is actually like, right? Because I mean, I proposed to my wife, and then the next day I was back on the campaign. Like, it was a municipal election in 2014. I took a day off. I went, I proposed to her. She said yes. It was great. And then the next morning I was back on the municipal campaign, right? And I spent the next 2 weeks doing that. And so we do, I think, as staff, people do a lot. But there isn't enough capacity to be able to do all the great work that we need to do, right? And so this model that I'm working on, and that I think is the model that works, it depends on volunteers. It depends on community leaders. It depends on folks who have the experience, the knowledge, and have the capacity to be able to help us with things, right? Mm-hmm. And we see this happen in the States more and more, where volunteers are driving a lot of this sort of front-facing or organizing stuff, yep. Right? I was reading Obama's new memoir, and this is when he's still like, mm-hmm. This is still early 2008, when it was still Obama was still great, and
yeah.
I was gonna say, if you didn't.
Yeah. Listen, hey, I have the timeline. Where cut off 2008 Obama. It's still kosher to say he was fine back then. But he talks about in 2008 that there's whole states where his canvassing is 100% driven by volunteers. Right? It's folks who are who are pulling canvas lists, who are recruiting volunteers, who are taking care of data entry. They're doing all of it from top to bottom, right? And so I love that idea. And I also think that within our party, we have such a wealth of experience, right? There's somebody who now has an elected role, so I won't name them. But when I was at the party, they were still a riding activist. They were a riding CFO. And they were probably at the time, and probably still are, one of the best CFOs in the province. And so what we did was, we would do these drop-in sessions once every 2 weeks, where CFOs could just come in, ask him questions, and he would just try and answer people's questions. And this stuff isn't the stuff that gets people like really riled up, like, ooh, audits.
There are some people, and I think if they're watching any media, they're watching this show.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah,
this is a very specific bunch of governance nerds who really care about this stuff. But and me as staff, obviously, I still played a role in that. But we were able to get more information out to folks, right, by using that local knowledge and the volunteers that we have. And I think we need to do more of that, and we need to do a better job of that. Again, I don't think it's anybody's fault. I think that the structures and the systems we have are very staff dependent. I talk about this a lot to folks when I worked at the party. If you requested the membership list, it took 3 staff people and 6 emails to generate a membership list, right? And let's take that administrative work off of our staff's plates so that they can focus on organizing, they can focus on grassroots building. And let's build models that not only use our volunteers, but also use modern technology to make it easier to get that stuff out to folks, right?
Yeah, I think if I can, Sean,
Please.
I think DG, that's a really huge point. Is how does the party capitalize, especially the great volunteers? We have a huge country. You know, this country is one of the largest countries in the world. And how are we supposed to balance between the volunteers in Nova Scotia all the way to Vancouver Island? And I think you hit a really common tool, which is technology. Is what kind of ideas do folks have on bridging that while also keeping the balance of making sure that the experience at the local level is maintained? Like you talked about a CFO, for example. Maybe he doesn't have, or they don't have that kind of good of technological skills, but they have a huge experience. By teaming them up with other good volunteers, that CFO becomes a professional development tool across the country. And then, just like the old Indigenous saying in the West Coast goes, when the tide rises, all canoes rise. It has the kind of power to do that, I think. And I'm really glad you mentioned that point, because I've been curious. I think many of the folks in my EDA and many of the people who are organizers in Alberta often ask, how does technology play a role? And COVID has highlighted its strength more now than ever, I think. And it's a perfect time, I think, especially with convention coming up, to really focus on that. Is how do we get maybe even a standardized digital tool for organizers?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because COVID, I think, not only has it sort of I don't even think it's just that it's introduced folks to digital tools. I think it's forced people to use digital tools. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of these tools, like I was using Zoom for party meetings this is the cool thing to say. I was using Zoom before it was cool.
You did it. You beat me to it, DJ.
It was right there. It was right there. But I remember using Zoom in, what was it, like 18? Yeah, in like 2018. So like these tools have existed, but it's been people getting comfortable with the tools, and I think the pandemic has forced people to take on these tools. And I think we would be amiss to not utilize these more, right? Like one of the things that I talk about in training is, we run a fantastic training program. And a lot of it has now shifted to webinars and digital training. And we do a lot of great stuff, but I think one of the things that ends up happening is that, our most of our webinars are still live, so they're staff intensive. And then we do really great sort of in-person 3-day, 5-day campaign schools for VCOs and managers. Like I've run some of them and they're great, but the in-person model in itself excludes certain folks from being able to participate, right? Like you have to be able to get time off from work. You have to be able to come out to, Toronto, Ottawa, Vancouver, wherever the training's happening, be able to participate. And so, I've been thinking about what does it look like to take some of those trainings and break them out into almost like a curriculum model, right? So you look at it and you actually build these webinars one on top of the other, and you include an IRL portion to them so that we know that folks are actually doing them. But we take like 70%, 80% of that training, we deliver it digitally, right? And you have to do it well. Like my wife is a teacher, so talking about e-learning is not totally kosher. But we don't have the staff to be able to deliver this training at the scale that we need to. And so we use these digital tools. We build up this library so that, post-election E+2, that 18-year-old who was really excited by the campaign is like, how do I stay involved? How do I do more? Look, here's an entire library. Here's a roadmap. If this is the path you want to do, here's an entire catalog for you. Start with that. We'll get you more, right? But yeah, we would be missing such an opportunity if we don't use digital tools right now to continue to do some of this organizing.
I would make a suggestion too, if I think that's a great model, and I see particularly the Ontario NDP has been doing a lot of this sort of stuff. Again, disclosing to everyone who doesn't know, I'm on the board of the Ontario NDP, but there are a lot of online tools and like online campaign school that the Ontario NDP is doing. I think there's a lot of capacity there that could be built up, and I think it's something that the federal party should look at, because it is an effective way to get information out. You keep the IRL stuff going, but even having learn at your own pace and just having information available so that someone who wants to like know the nuts and bolts of how a New Democrat runs a campaign, can go and say like, oh, here's a list of 20 things with videos and some stuff to read, and I can look over it. And it's people that have actually done the work. And for if the party could be there at the same time and say, hey, someone's really interested in, campaign finance law. Well, let's connect them with the best CFO this side of, Winnipeg. And I'm trying not to name the person because I know who DJ's talking about.
I thought you were going to say something there. This side of what, Sean?
Quick pivot. Good pivot.
Yeah.
But I think it would be a good thing for the party to do, to connect people not only with the resources where they can learn at their own pace, but also be there to connect with the people, with the people that are doing the work in the party, and being able to say like, hey, we noticed that you watched 3 webinars on how to file like AR paperwork with Elections Canada. Would you like to talk to somebody but in a in a good way, like because obviously these are things that are important for us to do, to like support activists, to support people that want to like learn something, learn legislation, because there's a legislative aspect to it, to learn public policy, to learn interactions on governance points and things like that. There's a lot, like there's so much there, and it's not hard. Like, this is the other thing too, like we can be a force for good around volunteers and supporting people. It's not frightening, Devin. I'm just noticing we're getting some comments, but yes, I do believe that. I do believe that's a good thing forward, that the broad majority of things that you would be able to put out, that people just be able to access anonymously within the party, and be like, hey, here's like the crash course. This is what we do. And so people who are curious and not wanting to be committal and good stuff coming in here.
And this is where this is where both of those ideas sort of work together, right? So you create digital online learning for folks, right? And then you pair that with a large crew of volunteer leaders, right? Like folks who have sort of taken on, who want to take on that work and who are willing to do that work, right? And exactly that, right? Like you're able to see and look. When I was laughing about when you mentioned CFOs, a good CFO is manna from heaven. Like that, I was not like, if you're a good CFO and you're listening right now, like just reach out to me. I will connect you to whoever we need to connect you to, because good CFOs are very, very valuable. But that's exactly it, right? Like if we broaden sort of the type of work, the type of trainings we offer, right? And like, I think that's another thing that we need to think a little bit about, looking at how social media and new media now plays more of a role, and the idea of like organic amplification and folks being able to just start a small media empire, Sean.
It's a very small one.
Well, getting there. But I think like we look at some of those trainings that we offer, right? And then we connect them with people who have the capacity and the experience and the knowledge to be able to move people along the ladder of engagement, right? I think one of the things that we don't, and this is again a resource thing, right? Like we don't really track volunteers through their path. Most of our sort of people who move through the volunteer path, it's self-guided, right? It's based on your own initiative and you going out there and doing more and more. And I think if we had a larger group of folks who could sort of move people along, sort of check in with folks, it also helps build a sense of community, right? Like the best campaigns that I've been in are ones where, like, frankly speaking, by the end of it, the volunteers are coming in not because of the candidate, but because the atmosphere in the campaign is one where they feel valued and they feel like they are actually part of the decision making and conversation process, right? Like every time I manage a campaign, I will always take time to answer questions, and I will also, if people have suggestions, I will always, if it's a bad suggestion, I'll tell folks, and if it's a good suggestion, I will also tell folks and incorporate that, because I think the more people feel ownership over a project, the more they feel like they have a vested interest in it succeeding, right? Mm-hmm. And I talk about this a lot, that my favorite campaign ever is actually one that I lost. It was 2014 Scarborough Rouge River. We ended up losing by about 3,000 votes. It was provincial. But it's my favorite campaign because we built such an incredible community. On E-Day, we had 700 volunteers out, right?
Wow.
And predominantly young, racialized folks, right? There's a significant low income portion there, and a lot of these kids who were coming in, there's when you go through manager school, they always say like, oh, a volunteer comes in, they have to be out in like under 5 minutes, right? Like the quicker you get them in and out, the better it is. And sorry for the folks who trained me who are listening. I apologize that you have to find out this way. But we set up a PlayStation with a TV in one of the corners of the office, right? And yeah, obviously people would still canvass, but after canvassing, yeah, come on, hang out, have some pizza, right? And so it creates that atmosphere of people actually wanting to participate, and it feels good for them, right? My proudest moment is on E+1. I was in the office, and over the course of the day, 4 different sets of kids came with like chocolates or like cupcakes and shit to say bye to me, right? And I love that because these are now kids who are engaged, and who now as long as we keep them engaged, they will grow up and will continue this activism. And that's the stuff that really excites me, right? Like getting young, racialized, folks who belong to equity-seeking groups, getting them involved in this stuff is the way that we build our movement, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It ties to some of the things that Blake and I were talking about earlier with, coming into politics from an Indigenous perspective, and wanting to give back to the community, and sometimes you don't know what it is. My path was by complete chance. A riding association president in my riding called me and said, "Do you want to run for the NDP?" Because they knew that I was a bartender at the time, and I had question period on every day, and I ran a drink special based on like whatever the NDP was doing that day. It was a good time when I was working, but
that's a deep cut there, Sean. It's deep political roots there. That's cool, man. I didn't know that.
And that's how I ran to be a candidate. I was always a party member and active on campaigns, but really stepping up that ladder into involvement. It's important for someone to be always doing the outreach and to connect with people, because you never know who it is, or you always want to talk to everybody, which is something that Blake and I were talking about earlier. You talk to everybody, even if they disagree with you. It doesn't matter. You talk to everybody. Everybody has something important to say. Even broken clocks are right twice a day. And that's a really important thing to do.
And that's exactly it. Like we have to be willing to have the conversation, right? We're not like, frankly, we're never going to agree 100%. Like the political party that is 100% aligned with your values is the political party of one person, you, right? But we have to be willing to have the conversations with folks, even if we know we're going to disagree. At least we had the conversation. And more often than not, through the conversation, you're going to find we actually agree about a lot more things than we disagree, right? So yeah, I'm 100% here for that. This idea that we don't talk past each other, we don't talk over each other, we talk with each other, right? And then we leave as friends.
Yeah, I think it's important. I don't think anyone has a friend that they agree 100% with on everything. And I think that's a really valuable lesson. DJ, before we pull in our next guest, any other comments or things you want to get in? When convention is, how can people vote for you? What is convention? Who are you? What is the NDP?
So see, this is how you know I'm a bad candidate, because I didn't lead with any of that stuff. I just dropped the ball on all of that stuff.
Well, this is how we know you're an organizer.
Exactly.
Right to business.
Exactly. Yeah. Sean's like, guys, come on, let's get this going. So convention is April 9th to the 11th. You can still register if you're a member of the party. I think it's ndp.ca/convention 2021, I think is the link. But I'm sure we can drop that link in the chat. And you can still register if you don't have a credential through your riding association. You can still register for the wait list. It is a delegated convention, so you have to be a delegate to vote for me. We don't know what the agenda looks like, so it'll be on one of those days, 9th, 10th, or 11th, that you'll be able to vote, and hopefully you'll vote for me. But yeah, I mean, convention is always a fun time. It's generally more fun because you get to see folks who you haven't seen from across the country, but it's still going to be great. So, I would encourage, if you can, to come out to it. And, my website is dhananjaikholi.ca. I'm on Facebook and Twitter, and you can see a bunch of my endorsements and my platform, and I'm always happy to answer questions. Again, you might not like my answer, but you will hear back from me. And I'd love to, engage with folks. One of the saddest things about this is that, generally in an IRL convention, you can go table to table, talk to folks, and people have an opportunity to to ask questions, and we don't have that right now. So unfortunately, I'm trying my best to get in front of riding associations, delegates, and answer folks' questions in the lead up. And drop me a line. I'd love to reach out to you.
Excellent. Well,
for two candidates, for two candidates.
You did pretty good. I'm still accepting peer pressure to run for an executive position for the federal party. So if anyone wants to peer pressure me to do that, let me know.
I'll give you a call tomorrow.
Always need someone on the Indigenous Commission.
Yeah, I think there's good work that could be done there. I'm still up in the air. As everyone knows, I'm hard at work with the Ontario side as well. We just struck a subcommittee, which is very exciting, and lots of things happening and wanting to support the Indigenous MPPs in Ontario. I was gonna do just a really perfect little sidestep into our next guest, who's been waiting so much. DJ, I'll let you finish though.
No, I was just going to say that the other great thing about convention is that, like Sean sort of mentioned, there's lots of positions to run for. And it's not just the president, it's a whole council and executive, and we need good people in all those positions. So if you're coming to convention, go check out the website, register to run for a position, so we can all do this work together.
That's a great message to end. No, this is really good. I'm going to clip that and put it on the internet. It's a really good message. And I think that's the other thing to close on this section with is the NDP is a Democratic Party, and it becomes Democratic when you put your name forward. And that's how it happens. There are, again, tons of positions available, and your voice is welcome and should be there. I'm not on the executive, I don't know, but we'll see. With that, I am going to plug another thing before we bring Suze on. Next Saturday, I'm going to throw a Brave New North house party, which will be right after convention. So, once we wrap up and all the official things are done, I'm going to basically open a stream, and please text me if you want to come hang out. We're also doing a pre. I think it's going to be a fun thing to do and touch base with folks who are there, or people who are listening in and watching on CPAC. It's probably going to be on CPAC. So I generally watch conventions. I was a delegate at our last one, but I believe there was the birthing of children around that time, so I wasn't able to be there. I just want to give a shout out to Lindy Eason, who's in the chat. So hello, Lindy. It's really nice to see Lindy. Okay, I've blabbered on enough. We are going to have an extra special stream this coming Monday, talking about convention resolutions and getting into the nitty-gritty of policy with Brandon Real Amyot and Shailene Panillo, who's just announced for the Oshawa NDP, and Jessa McLean as well, who is also running for NDP president. So it's going to be a really exciting night on Monday after my council meeting, and we're going to have a good time talking policy. With that, we're going to pull in the MPP for Toronto-Centre, everyone's favorite, friend of the show, Suze Morrison.
Hello.
Hey, Suze.
Hi, Suze.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm good. I had to reformat my computer this week, so I feel like I'm really whitewashed out by my camera, and I can't fix it. I don't have all my drivers installed yet, so we're gonna have to put up with this, but maybe I can change the mood lighting to work for us a little bit better.
Oh, you have a remote that just beep on with Sean now lighting.
No, it's true. Look, I can put on party mode even.
Whoa, that one should be on.
Party
Oh,
mode.
there we go.
Oh, that was nice.
Yeah, that was nice. I like party mode. I think I like party mode.
Suze, I like the professional mic that you've got set up there.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I also have one over here.
The real
you have two, Sean. I thought you were doing a Blake Desjarlais thing here.
No, I got these at the gas station.
Oh. Hey, if they work, they work, right?
I have young children, and if I have things like these hanging around, they're gonna get eaten.
Yeah.
And no, it's yeah. But Suze, welcome aboard. Thanks so much for coming on. We've had a great time already, but I want to focus on what's going on in Ontario since the last time we talked a couple of weeks ago. Number one, we had an Ontario budget, which is I believe that Marit Stiles put it best as saying that it was trash. We saw no supports for workers, paid sick days, any of the things that the Ontario government could actually do, evictions bans, support for renters, any of these sorts of things. How are you doing post-budget? What is on your radar?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Marit's comments that the budget was garbage, I think is putting it politely. I think the budget leaves a lot to be desired for a lot of people. And I think as we enter into another 4 weeks of lockdown, I think people are just confused at this point. They don't see the provincial government stepping up to help them in any sort of meaningful, tangible way. We don't have paid sick days. We don't have an eviction ban. We don't have rent subsidies. PSWs are still making basically minimum wage. The vaccine rollout is like, who knows? Good luck. And every other day it seems like the lockdown framework is changing. Today, and what's in the red zone and the gray zone and the next week we're going to be in purple triangle.
We actually have a new zone. It's a new zone. I think it's white. Like it's a whole other level. We no longer have like lockdown. We also have shutdown.
Yes, and emergency breaks now we have emergency breaks.
I can't wait for wave 6 and taupe level restrictions.
And so people are confused, and I think that they were looking for this budget to give them some sort of help, to give them some sort of hope that we're nearing the end of this, and people got neither. And they certainly got nothing that we have been pushing and fighting for the last year. But I think it's pretty clear that this government isn't just incompetent, but they just don't think it's their job to help people.
I think that's an ideological barrier that a lot of conservatives have, particularly elected conservatives who don't see the government as having any role in people's lives whatsoever. They're basically there to make sure that the dumps stay open, and even then they'd probably privatize the dump if they could. In a lot of cases, they did. But I digress. The NDP in Ontario, the Ontario NDP has been doing a lot of good work over the last couple of weeks. Myself, I make question period a regular occurrence in the House. It comes right after my morning meetings usually. And then I tune in and then I go back to work. And it's always great to see you folks sticking up for working people in the legislature. I think it's really important. If folks aren't watching question period at the Ontario Legislative Assembly, I'd highly recommend it to see what a good job a lot of the class of 2018 is up to. And it's really good and really important to watch Doug Ford squirm and ask Doug Downey to answer a question. And I think it's really, really important. Jeffrey Temple. Jeffrey Temple was my VCO in 2018. Just tuned in here on the chat. Hi, Jeff. He doesn't go by Jeff in real life, I think just on the internet. But how are you? So I think there's a lot of good things that need to be done, particularly paid sick days at the provincial level is number one, what needs to be happening. Also, I think overarchingly, we've been talking and listening to a lot of healthcare professionals, Dr. Warner, Dr. Bogosh, all these folks who are tuning, they're basically spelling out what the government has to do, and they're at the science table. They're at the vaccine task force. They're at all these places. Why isn't the government listening to healthcare and medical professionals about a COVID-0 strategy in Ontario?
I have no idea why he's not listening. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned Dr. Warner. I mean, his tweet just this morning about not just the human cost to the errors that this government is making, but the financial cost. It's like they can't understand. Like they're penny pinching now on the backs of workers for the most part to then spend $1 later. And not a long time later, very immediately later. So instead of spending, instead of investing in something like paid sick days, which we know not only saves lives, but what we're hearing from folks like Dr. Warner is that it saves money. So his tweet from this morning says it took 5 doctors, 4 ICU nurses, 4 RTs, which is, I guess, respiratory therapists, 1 perfusionist, 3 critical care paramedics, 3 hours to save a 40-year-old COVID patient. And really, think about the cost of that ICU bed. And what is that, 5, 10, 15, almost 20 human beings in our medical profession, 3 hours to save this person's life when $114 in paid sick leave could have saved that person's life before they ever got infected while their workplace was an outbreak.
And even to it, Suze, Dr. Warner just tweeted that patient has passed away, which is horrifying. It is such a horrifying story, and it's unconscionable to me that human life is being relegated to dollars and cents at the premier's office. That's exactly where it lives. It's not on healthcare. It's not on healthcare workers. It's not on the doctors. It's not on the science table or even the chief medical officer, who is incompetent. But it's on the government right now. And
what was that like, right?
What have we been doing for a year?
Yeah. Well, just if I might be able to add some part to that would be even in Alberta here. I think something so familiar to Sue's situation in Ontario is we have a government just as terrible and just as vicious to our essential workers, to the lives of everyday people, but especially our healthcare workers. What we've seen was that we were the last province to accept the wage top up just recently, literally just a couple weeks ago. The checks were being handed out, and tons of folks were already down and needed help before they got that check, especially when they got sick with the lack of sick benefit. They needed that support. They needed that extra dollar, and no one was there to help them. So we've seen a failure on both sides. And I think what's even worse in Alberta's particular sense is that we're seeing the move towards privatization of our essential workers who are currently working in healthcare while trying to prevent the spread of COVID-19. It's like a double whammy. We have these healthcare workers who are putting their lives at risk, people in sanitation, people in laundry, literally some of the most vulnerable folks already, now putting themselves in a position where they have to handle this dangerous material while also face the prospect of getting fired. That's what's happening in Alberta. That's what's happening across the country. And so, Suze, I just want to be able to, we haven't met before, but I hear so many great things about the work you're doing. Sean's told me lots about it. I see online, and I'm just really excited to share the panel screen with you, and you're doing such great work over there. So from all the way from Alberta, keep up the good fight.
Aw, thanks.
There's an interesting project that Blake's promoting, a bit of mutual aid in the riding with a project to support missing and murdered Indigenous women with the Red Ribbon Skirt Project in Edmonton, Griesbach. I'm going to share the link again. They need some funds to keep the project going. I'm going to share it in the chat. And it's important that we connect what we do in politics or what we do in media or what we do as an elected official with the communities. It's really important. And Suze, particularly the work that you've been doing in the community, and as well as advocating for your portfolios in the legislature is so important. So the last time that we talked about the evictions crisis. And maybe if you wanted to give a bit of an update for folks who are tuning in on that work and how things are looking in the riding.
Yeah, I mean, the eviction crisis continues to deepen. We saw the eviction moratorium lift. We haven't seen no eviction protections come in with the new lockdown order, which I think is incredibly dangerous. And we know that there are tens and tens of thousands of families right now that are on the brink of losing their homes through no fault of their own. They lost their income this year as a direct result of COVID-19. Haven't been able to pay their rent. And for the most part, I would say the majority of the folks that I've talked to, and the majority of cases I've seen, I've sat in on a number of hearings at the LTB. They're people that aren't, it's not like people stopped paying their rent completely, right? It's, maybe when they were getting served, here in downtown Toronto, the average price of a one-bedroom apartment here is over $2,000 a month. So even if you were getting the $2,000 in CERB right off the bat, you were short on rent. But people have been paying as much as they can. We're talking about people that have been maybe falling behind $100, $200 a month. They're doing the best they can, but they're making decisions between whether they pay the internet so their kid can stay in online school, or put food on the table, or pay the rent in full. And overwhelmingly, we're seeing these large corporate landlords, largely the real estate investment trusts, right? Like, it's not even a human being who's your landlord anymore, right? Like, your landlord is an investment portfolio that is publicly traded. And there's no compassion in a publicly traded portfolio to negotiate with families to get caught up the $200-$300 a month they've fallen behind over the last year, and to set up a payment plan. And there's been absolutely no help from the provincial government in terms of a rent subsidy, which is something we were pushing for again just a few weeks ago. And it's getting exhausting to bring these motions and these bills before the legislature over and over and over again. We've given the Conservatives so many opportunities to join with us on eviction protections and rent subsidies. We've been calling for them since day one of the pandemic last March. And they continue to fail tenants in Ontario, and refuse to take any meaningful action. And it's just absolutely terrible. And I think the eviction crisis before us is about to be one of the largest humanitarian crises we've ever faced in this province.
I think that's DJ?
I was just going to say, and Suze, you're so right about that. Like, it's, Blake used a word vicious, and like it's gone past incompetent. It is now malicious, and it is like, frankly speaking, it's evil, right? From everything that, like, just today there was that case of where 23 cop cruisers showed up to evict a single father and his two kids in the middle of a pandemic, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And the human cost to this government's inactions, we're seeing this every single day, and I find it incredible that there's some solutions that are just so vaccinate frontline workers, right? Like, vaccinate people who are risking their lives to keep everybody else safe. And this government can't take even the basic steps of humanity to keep people safe. And it has now gotten to the point where it just doesn't feel like it's incompetence. It feels like they are doing this on purpose, right? I mean, the way they botched the lockdown, shutdown, emergency break, whatever announcement it was last Friday, right? By saying one thing and then leaking something else, and there's a human cost to these political games that they play, right? And it's no longer just this idea of, oh, sorry, we're not reacting fast enough. It feels like they are trying to hurt people, right? And it's just, it's just disgusting at this
And
point.
there's a direct financial cost too. I mean, how much does it cost the province to fund the police service that's now sent 23 armed officers to evict a family? And I can guarantee you the police response to that cost the public purse more than it would have cost us to give a single dad and his kids enough money to get caught up on their rent through a rent subsidy. You know, we're talking about a family that probably was a few $1,000s behind on their rent. I can guarantee you we probably spent tens of thousands of dollars on 23 armed officers throwing a family out of their homes on a cold day. Like, let's not forget, you know, it's April, but it's still winter in the middle of a pandemic.
And I think to Sue's point, that's why so many folks are calling for a review of the police, especially the National Police Service, the RCMP, and what resources are going where, especially when it comes to their role in things like evictions and things like social services and things like community monitoring. What is the police's role in this, and where is their funding going? If their jurisdiction includes these things, there should be plans in place, especially in this case, as you point out, Suze, armed police coming to a residence. There's children there. That's going to be long-term intergenerational trauma effects there. No one likes seeing their dad get thrown out on the street by a bunch of cops with guns. That has a long-term effect. And as an Indigenous person, you know, Sean and I, you know that we're scared of police. Not because we feel as though we can't defend ourselves, but because we know that if we
know what they do.
We know what's going to happen. And so you know that family, he had to have been just so torn to have to walk out the way he did, and the human dignity. And DJ points out had the maliciousness, the intent. It's the exact consequence of when we put profit and money and big corporations in the driver's seat. It's the exact consequences of decisions that governments have made. These aren't coming up because, oh no, COVID. These problems were in place before COVID, and they're being exacerbated during COVID. And the problem wasn't fixed before, and they're only getting worse. So I think now more than ever, we need big solutions, big investments, in fixing these problems so that to make Sue's point, we're not spending that money down the road. We're not spending that 10 times more amount of money to now fix and help those children that have now been broken, watching their father having to not be able to provide and having to fix the social and health impacts of decisions like that. That's money on the table for taxpayers, and that's also broken families in our communities. Both in both issues, the government in Ontario is getting an F.
And sorry, Sean, just quickly, I want to give Suze a shout out here, because Suze, we were talking earlier about the importance of sort of not just like the way we build our party is doing the work in between campaigns on issues that we care about. And you know, last summer there was the Toronto police had arrested 3 protesters who were protesting. This is around a racial justice issue. And they were being held in what a lot of folks considered a malicious way, so that they'd be held over the weekend without charges being filed. And when folks called out for community support and for folks to show up, Suze was one of the 3 MPPs who showed up there and, you know, put her body on the line, used her elected power to try and get those folks out of there. And that's exactly the type of work that we need to be doing. And so, you know, shout outs to Suze, like you're not just talking the talk, you're out there every single day. We're doing that work as well. So, you know, that stuff deserves recognition. And yeah.
Thank you. It's nerve-wracking. I mean, there's probably no less than 3 times in the last year I've almost been arrested, but not that I'm counting.
It's a badge of honor though, right? Like, because you're doing the work, right? And you don't see any of these Tory MPPs getting out there standing up for anything. I mean, you have Brandy Hillier standing up for being a horrible human being. But outside of that, you don't see any of them standing up, and you also don't see any of the Liberal MPPs, whatever few remain now, doing that. It's New Democrats and New Democrats like Suze that are out there doing that work in the community.
If you're not willing to get arrested to help people who are being oppressed by the state, you know, like it's the thing. I was almost arrested a number of times during Idle No More, blocking traffic, and
exactly.
You know, oftentimes people will go back and say, you know, oh, what radicalized you? It was Idle No More. It was the Iraq War, and then Idle No More a few years after. Like that was my 1-2 combo where I ended up where I am. Suze, I want to double back with you and thank you for being there for community. It's so important as an elected official to be there for your community, and to show up is so important, and it's so powerful. So thank you. I'm not a part of that community, but I know what you were doing by being there, and it's so important to do that and to be a voice for people who don't have a voice. You do have a voice, and you're using it for all the right reasons. Responding to a comment we got a little while back, and we're just going to tie back into the housing piece around the landlord-tenant board. And you and I have had conversations about this before in Ontario. There's some concern from different bodies, particularly the Peterborough Community Legal Service. Our friend Mikey is on the board there at Legal Aid in Peterborough, and they do a lot of work with for tenants in the community. And the concern from them is that they're hearing that the landlord-tenant board is going to be going on permanent online, and that their clients and community members who need legal representation don't have the means nor access to get onto these Zoom evictions hearings. And it only exacerbates the problem and the evictions crisis. What can we do to stop that?
I don't know what the solution is to fix it, but we've got to find a plan and a path forward here. These online virtual hearings are a dumpster fire. And I mean that in the strongest terms possible. They're a complete affront to the principles of access to justice. They are rife with human rights abuses. They disproportionately disadvantage people with disabilities, people with language barriers, people in poverty who may or may not have access to a phone or a computer or internet to actually get connected into these hearings. If you're at the point where you're at an LTB hearing, that means you are months and months and months behind on your rent. How much do you want to bet you've been able to keep the lights and the internet on? The very notion that people are going to be able to log into these hearings successfully to defend their housing, a most basic human right, they've just missed the mark on the premise entirely. And I understand that, we've got everyone right now trying to figure out how to do things online in as safe a way as possible. But I think that the example of the landlord-tenant board is probably the best example of how not to do that, of how to get it wrong every step of the way, and how to botch a transition to an online process so completely and so entirely, and in such flagrant ways that just straight up abuse human rights. And the horror stories that we've been hearing from tenants directly, from the legal clinic, from ACTO, which is the Advocacy Center for Tenants Ontario. ACTO put together a whole report outlining everything that was going on in these online hearings. This has been going on for 6 to 8 months now. Back when the board opened last August. Well, by September, October, ACTO had gotten so fed up, they threw their hands up in the air and said, well, here's your report. You cannot look away from this. And they documented all of these abuses. And still, the provincial government has done nothing to step in and clean this up. It's an absolute nightmare. People are being evicted in as little as 60 seconds in the province of Ontario. It's a disaster.
It's an absolute disaster. You and I talked a few months ago on one of the dry runs, actually, to the show before it started happening, about these hearings that were happening. And there was one of these guys representing the landlord or even the tenant, and there have these 30-second Zoom calls. The man had died, and
Whoa.
there was the defendant isn't here, we're going to evict him. And it is so wrong. Mikey just says, that's exactly right, Suze. We often fall into thinking that everyone in the country is familiar with being on Zoom for hours. It is completely alien to a senior living on CPP,
Yeah.
facing eviction, or rural OW recipient.
Even worse,
100%.
Even worse, it's not even Zoom. Like it's literally Microsoft Teams, which is like worse. I know.
Torture.
Oh, it puts a bad taste in your mouth. And like even like I consider myself a very technologically capable person. You know, I am very handy. I am very tech savvy. You know, millennial, at the go, ready to help all my boomer friends open and rotate their PDFs. And one day when I was sitting in on a block of hearings, my audio wouldn't connect and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And I was trying to problem solve on my computer. Every other app on my computer was coming out through my speakers. And Microsoft Teams has this fun little trick where it will override the default settings of your computer and send your audio somewhere completely else that may be an audio device you haven't used in, you know, a year. And so for whatever reason, Microsoft Teams had picked up a Bluetooth pair of headphones I had in a drawer in the living room that I hadn't had plugged into the computer for probably a year, and was sending the audio out to the computer. And it took me half an hour to figure that out because it was buried in the Microsoft Teams settings. And then when you try to call into the backup line on the phone line, it was just complete gibberish. It was, you know, and then when you try to request any sort of tech help, you'd think that like the people running these hearings would figure these things out and like know that, hey, Microsoft Teams has this funny quirk of like overriding your system audio settings and help you navigate that. You know, their excuse was turn it off and on again. Just absolutely outrageous stuff. Like it's that bad. Yeah. It's that bad. And if I can't figure it out and face those kind of technological barriers as someone with an immense amount of privilege who doesn't have a language barrier on top of it, you know, who can navigate confidently technological issues. And, you know, I may be a senior who doesn't speak English, who doesn't understand what my computer is doing. Like it's just setting people up for failure completely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there was that really horrifying story I remember where somebody had called into a hearing and there was a lot of background noise. And finally, somebody from the board was like, can you move into someplace where there isn't background noise? And the guy's like, I'm in a payphone and it's raining outside, right? And like, I'm going to run out of quarters soon. And this person was defending their right to housing from a public payphone, worried about, you know, if this goes on much longer, I'm not going to have quarters anymore. And it was just like, well, too bad, so sad, right? Like that's literally the OLRB's response to this, right?
Mm-hmm. It really brings the question about like social housing. It really brings up the question about how big that actually needs to be and how much of a solution that is to our anti-poverty puzzle. It's a major foundation to ending poverty in Canada. If we can make sure that we can guarantee proper housing, and even just the idea of eviction goes against the very social narrative we tell ourselves as Canadians, that we're neighborly, we pay each other's taxes, we make sure that we're all free and prosperous until you lose your house. When you do that, then you're going to be called homeless, and you're a whole other brand of problem, quote unquote, for the government. And I think that kind of narrative is persistent, especially throughout the growth period of Canada. And it was cheaper. You got to imagine that, you know, be able to buy a house in the 40s and the 50s after the war, cheap, $20,000, you're set. Millennials today, young people today, the people who can't even afford to get into the housing market are building a whole class of people, of folks that don't have the kind of capital or even just the mortgage ability to then further invest and pay off some of the growing debt that we're seeing. And so I think we have two problems on both ends, which is we have this need for social housing, this huge growing need for social housing. At the same time, we're suppressing the ability of folks to keep their houses while also being able to purchase a house for the first time. And I think it's a double whammy on the housing market. It's one that's set up to fail. And there's only one golden goose solution, I think, and that's social housing. But not just the social housing we talk about for folks who are living in maybe Toronto-Centre who need an emergency shelter right now. I'm talking about social housing for those folks, for example, who maybe had a job at one point and could no longer afford a mortgage because the bank has wringed their neck and their wallet dry. Now they have to transition into somewhere where they have a family and they need to get back on their feet. That could be known as social housing. Someone like the father you talked about, Suze, earlier, and his kids. Maybe the police could have not been involved, and it could have been a social worker came in there and said, "Don't worry, we're going to get you a better home in a community. Your kids are going to be safe." That would have been the solution. That would have, one, saved the taxpayer dollars, and two, made sure those kids and that father didn't have to lose sleep over the idea of what cardboard box to fund, right? And like, it's just the reality that there's so many simple solutions that can be led with compassion that aren't being met by our current governments. And I just feel so bad, Suze, for the folks in Ontario who are being forced out right now. We're being forced out without the guarantee of non-eviction protection. I'm really excited to know that you folks are doing work about that, though. And I'm sure that with your continued push against the government, that maybe some of even the municipal governments could help out. But it's a rising emergency in the country. Have you seen any support from the federal government in terms of Ontario's response to the anti-poverty work that the federal government was investing in, or was it a success or a fail?
I mean, they want to wave around the $40 billion national housing strategy every chance they get, as their big flag. But I mean, let's be honest here. You could take $40 billion, sounds like a large amount of money. But until you look at the problem it's trying to fix and realize what a drop in the bucket it is. I mean, you could take that $40 billion and put it into Ontario alone, and it wouldn't be enough to fix the housing crisis.
Toronto alone, yeah.
You could into Toronto alone. I mean, Toronto Community Housing has a $2 billion capital repair backlog. Now, that's just the deficit that would stop the bleeding that's actually leading us to close units. Mm-hmm. We are losing stock of subsidized housing here in Toronto every year. About 1,000 units of it are coming offline because the units are in such a bad state of repair. They're not livable. And so, when the units turn over, they can't put new tenants into them. So we're losing about 1,000 units a year right now. And it would take $2 billion just to stabilize community housing to keep the boat afloat in terms of the capital repair backlog. And that's not putting a single penny into actually building any new units to address the fact that there's over about 300,000 people in Toronto alone on a wait list. Who've been on a wait list for 10 to 15 years waiting for affordable housing. I mean, I grew up on the wait list for Toronto Community Housing. My mom went on that list when she became a single mom when I was 9 years old. And she wasn't offered a unit until 15 years later. I had graduated university, moved out on my own. She was no longer a single mom of 2 kids. She was now a disabled senior who needed a wheelchair accessible unit. Her housing needs had changed completely. And even then, after waiting 15 years, she was only prioritized to the top of the list after she lost her housing and spent 6 weeks in a shelter and was finally triaged after 15 years. So, it's personal for me, but $40 billion across the entire country is not going to cut it. It's not even going to stop the bleeding.
Exactly. Yeah, especially because we're supposed to share that here in my district, for example, Edmonton-Griesbach, one of the poorest districts in all of Alberta, highest child poverty rate in Alberta, and $40 billion is supposed to cover this problem and the problem in Toronto-Centre. Our 2 jurisdictions by themselves would absorb that fund in seconds, let alone Vancouver, Ottawa, the other prairie provinces, and some of the other major cities like Montreal. It's a big joke, and I think that Shawnee hit the nail on the head.
Right? Like the mid-sized cities also really get left behind.
Yeah.
Talking about, in Ontario, it's the Londons and the Hamiltons and the Windsors and the Kitchener-Waterloos who don't have, the same tax revenue that some of the larger municipalities benefit from. And these, smaller municipal service providers are on the hook for these, significant housing programs that they don't have the capacity to raise revenue for. And the province has abandoned them, and the federal government is off trying to pat itself on the back.
Yeah.
For money that's just not enough, and it's not working.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, here in Peel, and it's interesting you brought up mid-sized cities, because I think in a lot of places like Peel, there's the bigger issue of invisible poverty and invisible homelessness, right? Such a large car culture And so it's, it becomes much larger problem of out of sight, out of mind. But it's an 18-year wait list for public housing, right? And more often than not, you spend far more than 18 years, right? And so 40. And Adam Vaughan was out on Twitter, I think, a couple of days ago, trying to argue about how $40 billion, what a huge amount. And even with my frustration is even if you start with that, well, at least start spending it, right? I mean, the money's been earmarked for how long, and it's being
Adam,
$40 billion over 10 years too, right? Like, okay, Adam, okay.
Yeah.
Give the money to DJ; he'll fix it.
Yeah.
Adam Vaughan has spent 6 years trying to argue that a line that goes up is actually going down.
Yep.
That man is going to cause me a personal injury from how hard my eyes roll into the back of my head every time he opens his mouth on Twitter.
Oh, but he's a socialist.
Yeah, don't worry. This line's still going up.
Adam Vaughan is just unbearable. He is. Yeah. Anyway, we shouldn't waste too much time talking about him.
We should move on.
Yeah. It's just, again, it's just the audacity of not just underfunding, but then trying to sell it as you're doing something so incredible or so amazing. And it's like, just at least just have the decency to be quiet, right? Like, just at least have the decency to not pretend. But here we are, Doug Ford's no better at that, with trying to, my favorite was with the education announcements of how much funding the Ontario government is putting into education. It was like, oh, actually 70% of that is, money from school boards and the federal money, but them just trying to sell it off as their own money. There's that level of deceit and that level of just brazen lying.
We are spending pennies on the dollar.
The classic conservative trick, it's a bait and switch. Let's switch one word and call it a provincial program. Whether it's the funding for example, in Alberta, we had this huge famous what do they call it? They changed the name in Alberta, but the federal program was called the Federal Site Rehabilitation Program. And in Alberta, what that means is the federal government was looking to invest not just in our jurisdiction, but across the country in target jurisdictions where oil and gas production's large. They're looking at these things called orphan wells, saying, okay, we have an orphan well here. It's been abandoned by the oil company. There's two, orphan and abandoned oil wells. The federal government's picking up abandoned oil wells, not orphan, but abandoned. And so abandoned or orphan well is something where the company has dissolved, gone bankrupt, and have to leave this well there. That's orphaned. And then the government is supposed to come in now and cap and seal and reclaim all of this. However, the amount that's necessary is in the near $50 billion range. And the government, Canada comes in and says $1 billion and 20 jobs. And it's more than that, but it's something around 1,000 permanent jobs and 3,000 seasonal jobs. That's a drop in the bucket, but then they sell it. They criticize the government for not doing enough, the federal government. You're not doing enough. And then in Alberta, they reroute and sell that $1 billion like it's going to fix the problem and it's a provincial program. And the same thing is true in Ontario. They're recycling federal dollars in order to get provincial votes.
Yeah.
Well,
go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, and I mean, we share this, Blake, that we have, we're in competition of who has the most noxious premier between you and us. But like ours is, I mean, this is incredible. I just thought that Doug Ford put out this thing a couple of weeks ago where schools where provincial money is going in for capital projects, capital building, will have to put signs up that advertise that they've received provincial money to build. And there's that, Ontario Open for Business giant blue signs that they have to start putting up everywhere.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
Just so, at some point you're just like, aren't you embarrassed? Like, aren't you embarrassed of who you are and what you do? But
no, they're not. They would have been embarrassed a long time ago.
Ontario Conservatives, this liquidation world, essentially.
Yeah. No, but the Ontario
resell everything.
The Liberals under the last government were really good at that too. I mean, every single school construction site, public infrastructure project had these giant, build on signage in front of them. And it really was just, the Liberal campaign bus rolling out community after community using public dollars to try and campaign for re-election.
If you look at the unrolling of funding in the last term, Kathleen, when Deb Matthews, she went to all the Liberal strongholds. So at the time, Deb Matthews, I believe she was the rep at Guelph or London North Centre.
London North Centre.
Which we took, by the way, which is Terrence's riding. Terrence is amazing.
Yeah, and Terrence,
anyways, he's amazing, but a lot of the announcements that the Ontario Liberal Party would do with their cabinet ministers under Kathleen Wynne is they would put a lot of public money into things that made their cabinet ministers look really, really good. Number one would be my favorite, for horrible human beings who happen to still want to be the leader of the Liberal Party of Ontario. I think it's only one person, Stephen Del Duca, who would bully Ministry of Transportation staff here in Ontario to put GO station stops in his riding up at King Vaughan while he was the Minister of Transportation. And oh, look, there's a GO station. And the other thing, what is it? He built a swimming pool on protected conservation wetland that was adjacent to his property, right? And do you know what he said? You know what he said when he got caught? He said, "Oh, I'll give you the other corner of the property to the wetland." The other corner of the property is probably where the shed was.
Yeah.
It's stupid. Like, these Ontario Liberals are horrible. They're horrible. And they really must be, I don't say this often enough. The Ontario Liberal Party needs to be destroyed. And we just can't do this anymore. We need to get with the picture with the rest of Canada and all other provincial governments from Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, British Columbia. There's no Liberal Party in any of those provinces. Why should we have one here?
Yeah.
We don't need them.
Yeah.
This is the thing, they're just as corrupt. They had a chance with Kate Graham. They had a chance with Mitzi. They had a chance with Michael Couteau. Michael Couteau has already jumped ship, the Ontario Liberals. He's already jumped ship. He knows Del Duca is nothing. Del Duca is the final nail in the coffin of the Ontario Liberal Party. Mm-hmm. Moving forward, they have no confidence in the people of Ontario. They're polling like garbage across the place. What we need to do is we need to create an alternative vision for the province of Ontario and how we rebuild after Doug Ford. It's simple. And there are very reasonable solutions coming out of the Ontario NDP caucus.
Mm-hmm. I get almost the only reasonable solutions, to be really frank, for Ontario to get back up on its feet and help, reinvest in the country and be an economic leader like it's used to. It can't continue the way it is. Alberta.
We have a provincial NDP party in Canada advocating for a jobs guarantee. Do you know how cool that is?
Huge for Ontario.
I think it's super cool. I have an old Communist Party button from the 1930s that just says Jobs Guarantee Canada on it. It's in my pickup truck. Yeah. It's in my pickup truck on the visor. It's very cool. Like, Jobs Guarantee is good public policy. That's in the Green New Democratic deal. I'm about to become I've been invited to give a speech about the Green New Democratic deal on Earth Day. With Peter Tabbins. I'm really looking forward to that. But I think there's a ton of things that are really, really good.
Just on that provincial thing, Sean, if I can mention real quick. Sean mentioned New Democrats were knocking down doors across the country. And the prairies are just only one example of where we've kicked out Liberals. In Ontario, you can do it too. The fake branding of it's a fake left they're offering you. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for that kind of stuff. It's a dangerous game to play that the prairies we learned a long time ago. We kicked them out. Yukon is in the process of doing that right now. and
It's
they're
actually
facing a
amazing.
big uphill election, and it's a wonderful thing to see. So if any of your viewers can toss a donation or a like or a share of some of the wonderful folks running in the territory just northwest of Alberta here, Yukon, they're doing a great job fighting for our folks and our workers in the north. So if you can, please help them out. This could be a historic moment for NDP and a historic moment for the Yukon. So in terms of our solidarity with our new Democrats across the country, go Yukon.
I'm a huge fan of the Yukon. I spent a lot of time. Blake is. This is funny. Blake's been on for a long time, and every time we mention a new region of Canada, I say I spent a lot of time in that province or that
Playing
territory.
music.
But I have spent a lot of time in the Yukon. I was the house band at the Midnight Sun Hotel for about a month, and in Dawson City, and had a really good time up there. And but there are amazing people up in the Yukon. It's a beautiful place. And Kate White and the Yukon NDP, they're doing a really, really good job. When I was running in 2018, we had the former chief of staff of the leader at the time, unfortunately I forget, came down to Peterborough, Kawartha, north of Toronto, my riding, and helped out on the campaign. Shout out to Ken Bolton. I was just about to say his address. I'm not in my writing, but he's a very, very cool fella. And shout out to the Yukon NDP. I'm actually going to do a special stream the night of the Yukon election. Blake, if you want to come on and watch CBC with me on the internet, that'd be really fun. I know you're busy, but we can touch base. I think there's a lot of things, and my philosophy around the future of the provincial parties from Ontario all the way over to the Yukon and the Northwest Territories and Nunavut. Northwest Territories and Nunavut, there are no political parties there, but there are still great people there who are doing amazing work. And I think that we get too partisan sometimes and we forget about them. It's really important that we focus on the work that's happening up there. But one of the things that are really, really interesting is the fact that there are no liberal parties, effective liberal parties. There's barely an effective Liberal Party in Quebec. At this point, Quebec Solidaire, that's a really good political party. The Quebec NDP, those are good parties. CAQ, then the Liberals, it's right and center right fighting each other. But there are left options in Quebec. I think there's a lot of opportunity too for the Nova Scotia NDP and the Newfoundland NDP. And I was very saddened to hear that Alison Coffin lost her seat at Kitiviti. But there are a lot of things happening. Before we get into, I'm going to call it free-for-all mode, I want to touch base with Suze on one issue, which is very close to me. I want to touch base on a statement that Suze put out this week. In memoriam of a young woman who lost her life here in my community recently, Selena Taylor, who was murdered by her partner quite brutally, was sent into a coma in September of last year, and her family just a few weeks ago made the very difficult decision to remove life support from Selena, and to thank Suze really quite as much as I can for being one of the only people in elected office that made a statement on that when our community is calling for justice on the perpetrator of that murder, that the Crown prosecutor needs to listen to the family, and that the Crown prosecutors need to listen to the community in our calls for justice and for increased charges. And I want to thank you very personally from me as being a person in this community, but also as a bit of a representative from our council for making that, for putting in the time to think about us. It's very important and it's very helpful, and it means a lot to me, and I'm sure it means a lot to the family to have an elected official at Queen's Park acknowledging the loss that our community is facing and the tragedy that we're facing. So thank you, Suze, for stepping up. And I didn't call you. You did that. Your team stepped up and called for justice for Selena Taylor, and that is very important. And it's so appreciated. And I want to thank you.
Honestly, it's a really heartbreaking story and a really heartbreaking situation. And my deepest condolences to you and your whole community at Curve Lake. It's, I can't imagine what the friends and the family of Selena are going through. I wish I could do more than make statements. And it's one of the most frustrating parts about being an opposition member in the legislature. When you feel like all we can do is continue to call for the province to act and do the right thing. When are we going to see full implementation for the calls to justice in the MMIW report? Women like Selena, we shouldn't be losing them still. Like, it should never have come to this. And it comes down to, all levels of government continuing to ignore the TRC, continuing to ignore the calls to justice in the final report from the inquiry, continuing to ignore and underfund Indigenous communities to do the work that needs to be done to support women and to end violence in the communities. And it's heartbreaking and it's frustrating, and it shouldn't be like this. And I wish I could do more than make statements.
Well, Suze, I think it's really important that you did. And as an Indigenous person, especially one seeking elected office, it does have a huge impact, even though it may not feel like it, because it comes in the wake of people who think it's not even real. The Conservative Party, for example, Aaron O'Toole, just weeks ago, failed and would not state that there was a genocide against Indigenous people, or would not agree to that statement that there has been or is an ongoing genocide against Indigenous people. And this kind of statement shows Indigenous people that you actually care. You're seeing beyond the difficulty of just losing someone and seeing that there's actually this historic underbelly of Canada that's just devouring Indigenous people and continuing to eat and eat and eat. And it helps when you or other elected officials see that beast that we face every single day. It means a lot. And I think, to Sean's point, I also would like to extend thanks on behalf of Indigenous people, especially those of Curve Lake, to have such a wonderful representative like you in Ontario.
Look at now, Blake. She's Indigenous.
Oh, what? No one told me this. From where? Sure. I could have got neck bone. We could have been on the neck bone special me and Sean had just a second ago. We're just talking about all the
me right now.
But it's huge, so just as much as I do how important it is to hear it, so that we're not just gaslighting ourselves every day.
Yeah, and I'm a little sniffly now, but it's important. This hasn't happened in our community for a long time, so it's really tough here. Family is taking it hard, but community's taking it hard too, right? Like we know these people. These people, they live right over here, and like I drive by her house. It's a difficult thing, thing to contend with living here in the community, and it was so nice to just come upon a statement from you, Suze, and I know that you care, and it's so important. I shared it with my Gima, and we had a good chat about that. We really liked that. So important. So thank you.
You're welcome. I'm glad. For whatever it's worth, I'm glad that you folks felt supported.
Yeah, it's we're in a difficult place right now. We're advocating for the increase of charges on the perpetrator.
Mm-hmm.
Still sitting at aggravated assault, yeah?
It was an assault. Yeah, aggravated assault.
Yeah.
We're advocating for a murder charge.
Yeah.
We're doing that in support of the legal team on behalf of the family. So we want to be there to support the family and apply any political pressure that we can to support the family to ensure that they have the closure that they need. And I believe that we've entered the evening where we need a cat tax.
Yeah.
This is Nietzsche, not the philosopher like Ojibwe Nietzsche.
I thought for a second I was like Nietzsche. What?
No.
That's awesome. No, I heard it the Nietzsche way, like the native way, not
Yeah.
Nietzsche.
I went Friedrich.
I went philosopher.
After
Don't worry, Suze, I got you. I was in the same wavelength.
Oh no, that's not my style.
Yeah.
But also, it was great. It looked like your cat was making its way to the mic, like purposefully. Like Nietzsche had something that they wanted to contribute. I thought that was really cool.
Nietzsche is contributing. Yay, Nietzsche.
Put my microphone right off the desk is what's going to happen. He's so mean. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Do either of you, Sean or Blake, you guys have pets?
I have a cat.
No, I have no pets, but my parents' house on Fishing Lake Métis Settlement, we have tons of like animals, lots of dogs and cattle and cats everywhere. But they're like farm animals. They're more of the land's than they are ours. They seem to take care of themselves.
They show up once in a while to let you love them.
Yeah, exactly. If they're really, really having a boring day, they come to the house and they're like, okay, what kind of food do you have? It's like, okay, well, here's what we have today. Yeah, what about you,
DJ?
Unfortunately, no pets. I grew up with dogs, and I very desperately want a dog, but
Do it.
yeah, no, I really do. So I grew up with big dogs. I grew up with 2 German Shepherds, a Dalmatian, and a Golden Retriever, and I love dogs. Yeah, and my wife always has the responsible conversation with me. She's like, "We're never home. Who's going to take care of them? It's just the 2 of us." And I'm like, "We'll figure it." Like, I know it's a dumb thing to say, but I'm like, "We'll figure it out. Like, we'll just like we'll get."
Yeah.
Sorry.
And you do figure it out, right? Like it's like having a kid. It never makes sense.
It's literally like having kids.
But you figure it out.
You
DJ's is there. Let me have a fur baby.
Yeah. Like, I'm just going to clip this portion of this conversation afterwards, and I'm going to go upstairs and show it. And we're like, look, I've got elected representatives, future elected representatives also on my side on this. So, Vikita, I'm sorry, we're getting a dog at this point.
Yeah. Next slide, a dog.
Next time Sean has me on the show, it's like, thanks for your folks' advocacy.
I see you already
Your
have
wife would just be-
houseplants.
Yes.
Houseplants is a very good first step. Now, do you water the houseplants?
Oh, I'm obsessed with them. I'm obsessed with my plants.
Does your partner?
No, she doesn't care for them.
Okay,
I've
you're
named
never getting a
them-
dog.
Yeah.
It's not happening. No, I was very sad this winter. I lost 2 plants over this winter. They didn't make it through. And it's also, this is maybe a little bit too much sharing, but so my dad has a really good green thumb. Like, he can just grow, like, he'll be like, oh, desert, cool, I'll grow a forest, and he can do it. And I've always struggled with keeping plants alive. And so a couple of years ago, I was like, all right, I'm actually going to get into this. I'm actually going to like make an effort. Like, I downloaded an app to like keep, track of their schedule. Each of them got like separate types of fertilizer. Like, I went a little intense on it. And then after a while, I eased off, and I was like, they're not going to die. It's okay. You've got it. And then this winter, I guess I went too easy, and I lost 2 of them. And it's like,
oh no.
It's like, yeah.
Don't worry. You're gonna have the perfect balance right now, and it's almost like you've learned the balance required to take care of life and to take care of hopefully a movement here soon, come convention.
Hey man, from your lips to the ears of God.
Yeah, that's right.
But
is everyone here a delegate?
Sorry?
Suze, are you going to convention?
I'll probably show up. I don't think I'm like officially delegate. I think like electeds, we just show up to stuff and people let us in. I don't know.
Yeah, Suze, you're gonna be there. Suze is gonna be there.
DJ's running for an executive position. He wants to know if you have a vote.
Well, the thing is, Suze is not wrong, right? Like, it's like
That's true.
when it's like, oh, it's like, do you have a delegate credential? I'm an MPP. Oh well, just come on in, right? You just walk right in for that, right? I mean, look, they've earned it. Like, they've done the work, and at least folks like Suze are actually doing the work in the community as well to like keep our movement strong. And yeah, I think like that's the privilege of doing that work, is you get to show up to convention whenever you want to.
Well, like
we're running an unofficial propaganda machine.
Hey, no one ever said it. We're just gonna omit that part. Yeah.
We're like a sideshow, right? Like, we're like the attraction. Like, like everyone's there to like, you end up with like a lineup of people, who like want to meet you and ask questions. It's all really, really cool. But like, I don't go to convention. I am convention.
Whoa!
Suze,
That's pretty meta.
Convention is right where I am. That's where convention is at.
Not necessarily in a good way. Like we're like the circus act. Like the MVP. we're doing our
No, but like, this is a weird segue. But Suze, you're so right about it. I'm not going to talk about circus.
DJ's going to segue from that to like a convention.
but like,
and that's
Suze,
why.
But Suze, you're so right about this, and I think we don't do this well enough. But like the Liberals, right? They treat their electeds and like their like inner nerd celebrities like celebrities, and they make it so it's like, oh my God, I met only because we just kept saying his name over and over. I met Adam Bond, right? And it's like
no one's ever said that, by the way.
It's true. No, some Liberals have.
So this April Fools.
Yeah, couple days late. But unfortunately, /fortunately, our electeds, the people who run for the New Democrats, are so down to earth, and like like Suze would never walk in and be like, oh no, I'm sorry, I don't talk to you. You have to like get to a certain level before you talk to me. And like, maybe we need to cultivate a little bit of that celebrity culture, right? Where it's like, oh my God.
Well, I don't think we need to get to the point where it's like Suze Morrison walks into convention, someone comes up, it's like, oh, sorry, honey, do you have a wristband?
No, Suze is the convention, so Suze would be like, DJ, you're it. Pull a Justin Trudeau and just appoint your own governor general.
No, we don't need to do it. We don't need to do this.
Yeah.
The way you are describing the Liberal Party, are they really an MLM or a cult?
No. Yeah.
We talk about that like celebrity kind of status.
It's been a while since we've talked.
From that.
I have a great opportunity for. I hope you're doing really well. Just if you want to, no pressure, of course. Just check this out. It's and just let me know what you think and call me.
That's how. Yeah.
Hashtag boss babe. Hashtag.
Well, yeah. I mean, but also like
no opinion.
But it's also like the Liberal Party is exactly that, right? Like it's the way when you
charity in red.
No, we charity scandals exactly that. It's a microcosm of this elitism, and I think that's the New Democrats. We're talking about what it means to have support, like earn support, right? But the Liberals are so good at buying it. Making sure that government expenditures go to friends, not to the people who need it. Making sure that it's the Trudeau Foundation administering scholarships, not anybody else. And when you have a foundation like that, and that kind of patronage machine, when you've appointed and made senators for the last 150 years, and then they get to slough up all the bad stuff, and then I guess you have the power to create celebrities. And we have a celebrity that's a prime minister right now for our country. We have a most serious job for a prime minister run by someone who thinks it's more important to make sure that the public image is protected and his image of his father is protected and the image of the Liberal Party more than Canadians. And that should say something about the state of our democracy, to say something that we're talking more about the Liberal Party than we are about the lives of Canadians. And that's what that kind of, I think, party ideology does to folks. So I really love that, Suze, you know, you're a grassroots person. You come in and you earn that respect, right? And I think DJ's at the point you're trying to make is how do we make sure that we recognize our leaders and recognize that earned work that they've done. And I think that's the biggest difference between the notoriety of New Democrats and the notoriety of Liberals is we've earned it.
You have Suze is at 27 New Democrat points. You have to earn 27 New Democrat points to be able to talk to Suze. The rest of us are at like 6 points. It's like you get 6 points and you can get to the rest of us so far.
Well, as an elected, it can sometimes feel like a double standard. You know, when we're compared to, you know, the celebrity status, you know, high-ranking liberals that like exist in the same spaces that I operate in, you know, as a very grassroots elected official. And it can sometimes feel like a double standard of value when you're in certain spaces. And, you know, I used to struggle with this a lot, you know, back when Bill Morneau was still around. You know, he was our federal representative right here in Toronto Centre. The WE scandal was happening in the heart of our community. They're headquartered here in Toronto Centre. There was all kinds of shady stuff going on with, you know, WE sending their paid staff to work Bill's campaign, to come to his fundraisers. You know, and when you follow the money, you know, taxpayer dollars into that organization that's then going out and doing partisan liberal campaign work. But you know, it was almost I feel like I'm going to try and get to a point here, but I'm still kind of thinking it out. That, you know, this celebrity status that exists, you know, the community picks up on it sometimes. And, you know, these celebrity electeds get put up on a pedestal, and I could be at a community event with one, and you know, there's a certain level of reverence that they get, you know, when they show up in the community for the first time all year, and it's like, oh my goodness, Bill Morneau is here, and it's like I stop existing, even though, you know, I show up consistently and all the time, but more to the point that it's I don't know, it's like a double standard when they cultivate that celebrity status, that then almost it almost makes it harder to do that grassroots work and be successful at it, because it's just not like revered in the same way. Not that we should be revered. I don't want that either. But it allows them to just swoop into a community, show up once, and never come back again. Never invest in the community. Never build the relationships, and just ride election after election on this celebrity status, and it drives me absolutely insane.
Here, here.
Well, it's like they weaponize their celebrity status, right? Like they're able to exactly like that. You put it so well about the double standard, because it, in fact, if anything, it almost in a way erases the work that we do. It minimizes the work that we do, because they get to show up to an event and they take 2 hard questions or medium questions, and then they walk away. Meanwhile, you know, we're actually out here doing the work every single day, but almost in a way getting punished for it, because you're just Suze. You show up to the rallies, right? Versus if Bill showed up to a rally, it's like, oh boy, we need security. Bill is here. Oh my God, get the line. Bill is here. And it's like, yeah. Anyway, I think that double standard is a really
no charities allowed to be present anywhere 150 meters from him.
23 cop cars protecting Bill Morneau is good, but you know, apparently 23 cop cars is what you need to evict somebody. So it's about the same kind of expansion of resources, and it's just foolish. We're about 10:15. I don't like to keep people up beyond their bedtimes. I know Blake is on a different time zone, but I know that Suze and DJ work as hard as I do. And for those of us with children, the Easter Bunny does come tomorrow morning.
But you can just stare out.
For those in the Christian faith here in Eastern Standard Time. And I have to go and unlock the doors for the Easter Bunny. But this is a kids show, I hope you know. But I want to touch base with each of you, and one of the things that I found is a really nice thing to do when we kind of wrap these things up is we touch base. I'm going to start with you, Blake. What are you positive and hopeful about over the next couple of weeks? And share it with us and why you're excited. So go.
Well, I'm pretty hopeful to be able to touch base with community members in Edmonton, Griesba over the coming weeks more and more. As we collect nomination signatures, which has been difficult, we've actually found really beautiful moments and pockets of community and pockets of conversation in real life. We're doing it socially distanced and safe. They phone us looking to help in some ways and get in contact with them, either to share our ideas, from a pretty long distance. Usually if they're on their porch and I'm at the sidewalk and we just kind of yell at each other. But even that level of communication is so important when we're building this grassroots movement. So that's what I'm really excited about. Just meeting, interacting with all these people who put their life, many folks put their life into the party and put their life into justice and put their life into better ideas right here in Edmonton, Griesba. And I'm just so honored to support those folks and the mission and vision they have, because I share that vision. I don't want to be something that's other than. I want to be with and we. And I think that's what our party's all about. It's how we build up each and every one of us, because when the ocean rises, all boats rise. And I think that's such an important message for everyone. And that's what I'm really excited about, getting out there. And so if any of you folks live in Edmonton, Griesba, and want to sign nomination paper, or would like to just have a chat with me from a socially distanced chat, please reach out to my team or myself on social media. The link tree was in the chat, I believe. And just let us know what your ideas are, what your passions are, and let's make sure Edmonton Griesba is a better place. And let's make sure Canada is a better place.
Hi.
Canada Scope Tinoa.
Ha miigwech. DJ.
I'm going to do a double, if that's okay. One thing that I am, the first thing that I'm feeling positive and hopeful about is federal convention, which is, a strange thing to say. But I think, I announced that I'm seeking in early March. And since then, what I've been, honestly, the best part about running for this has been the opportunity to call folks and talk to folks and actually have an excuse to talk politics and progressive politics and movement building for hours. And honestly, some of those conversations have obviously not every conversation is going to be great, but a lot of those conversations have given me a lot of hope for the type of energy and just the amount of passion that people have for the party. And I'm really hoping that it comes out in a positive way at convention, but just the path to this has really left me feeling really positive. If ever, you start getting, and all of us on this panel, I'm sure have at a point started feeling cynical about the work that we do. And, just talking to somebody who cares about this stuff is a real good salve for that. And so I'm feeling really positive about that. And then the second thing, and I'm going to obviously regret saying this later, but the thing that I am feeling positive about is this federal election, right? The one that we all know is going to happen, yet the Trudeau government is denying is ever going to happen. So I sit on federal executive right now. I'm the racial justice chair, and I sit on the nominations committee. And the quality of candidates, the types of candidates that we are attracting across this country, it's just phenomenal, right? The types of folks who are putting their names forward. I mean, Blake, you're obviously an example of that, but the types of candidates that we are getting across this country in ridings where, that we've won in the past, in ridings that we've never won in the past, all across this country, folks are putting their name forwards. That's really giving me a lot of hope. And I think, and again, this is that weird optimism that you have to have as a New Democrat. I think that people, in response to what has happened in the pandemic and seeing how the federal Liberals have completely botched their response, that the NDP has had to push them every step of the way to get CERB top up, wage subsidy top up, to get all of that. And to see Aaron O'Toole and the Conservatives just doing nothing, right? Just worse than nothing, just being useless. I think there's an opportunity for us to really present a plan that will inspire folks. And we have a great team of candidates who are going to be out in the communities with that message. And I feel really hopeful. And, it's going to be 20-hour days, and it's going to be, a lot of campaigning, and that's fine. That's why we do the stuff that we do. And I'm actually pretty excited about it.
Yeah.
That's so great to hear. Thanks, DJ. Suze, what are you looking forward to?
I personally and selfishly am looking forward to hugging people again. I just got my first dose of my vaccine last week.
Oh, nice.
And I've already got my second date scheduled, and I just can't wait to start hugging people again. So I'm very, very hopeful for that. But I would say more broadly, I'm hopeful for 2022. We're going to be an election year here in Ontario within the next year. Next June. It's coming up real fast. And, again, like DJ said, the slate of candidates that are coming forward right now to put their name forward in 2022. Sean, I hope you're considering a run for us again.
Nope.
No.
What? Come on. There's still time. There's still June.
I'm a dark room operative now. I enjoy it.
I enjoy it.
And I'm so excited about the slate of candidates that we're going to be putting forward. I think we're going to run a great campaign. We don't have too many more seats that we need to pick up to form government. And I think if we hustle hard, if people are, ready to join with us, come and volunteer on campaigns, donate if you're able, that we stand a very, very good chance of making sure that Doug Ford is a one-term premier and kicking that man the hell out of the premier's office and finally getting to work for people here in the province of Ontario. So that brings me immense joy and hope, knowing that at the end of the day, we've only got a little bit more of a year left of Doug Ford. I'm really excited for the campaign in 2022.
Thanks for that, Suze. I think the thing that I'm most looking forward to is a number of things. I am looking forward to seeing everyone at Federal Convention online. I was lucky enough to be elected to attend by Member Writing Association. I am looking forward to the next federal election where I'll be out on the streets with canvassers, swinging punches, and doing what I do best, which is on the door. And again, in 2022, I look forward to giving a giant pile of money in pennies and quarters to my local NDP candidate here for Ontario, who I guarantee you will be a much better candidate than me.
You're a great candidate. What are you talking about?
I'm not I could run. I could do it, but my kids are little. My kids are little.
Is it going to be egg?
Don't rule it out yet, Sean. Don't rule it out yet. Think about sleep on it.
It's gonna be fine. I'll come and work for you. It'll be fine.
There we go.
When Suze is the housing minister, I'll come on as chief of staff. You just got to make the call.
Record that right now.
Knock on doors with me any day in Toronto.
That we're literally doing nepotism on the internet live. And
at least it's out in the open and not behind closed doors. At least we're doing it in front of them.
This is what we mean by transparency.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But speaking about monies and quarters, I would be remiss by EDA president, who's probably watching, Chris, if I didn't say it. Please, if you have some more pennies and quarters and you want to help out Alberta get back up on its feet by electing a progressive voice in our most in one of the districts we really feel we have a solid chance and put up a real good scrappy fight is right here in Edmonton, Griesba. So if you haven't already, or maybe you did already, anything helps. A couple dollars here and there. The link is in the link tree that Sean put it in the chat earlier. If you can have $10-20 to pitch in, it would help us a lot. We have a uphill battle. We're in a sea of blue. And so help us bust out of this in a big way. So thanks so much, folks. And Sean, of course, this has been great.
No problem. It's been a good time. And I'll put that link back in the chat for everyone here now. They're going to get it in a couple of seconds. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. I've taken my glasses off, which I haven't done in a number of weeks, so I'm feeling youthful. But I want to thank everyone for tuning in. We've had a really great conversation tonight. Come on back to this space. So make sure you hit the like, make sure you press subscribe, press the little bell icon. We're going to be back on Monday, and we're going to dive into all 438 resolutions of the federal NDP in a live show that's going to go very late. We're going to look at each and every one from all 7 sections with Brendan Real Emyot, who's from Aurelia in the student union up there from Lakehead. We're going to talk to Jessa McLean, who's the founder of New Demo Chat, who's also running for federal NDP president against DJ Kholi. We're also going to be talking to newly declared candidate for nomination, Shalene Panillo, who is amazing. And if you're not following any of those people, please come check them out on Monday night, probably around 8 o'clock. We'll get started. So please get your convention policy booklets ready for prioritization, because it's going to be a very ridiculous sort of night, because we've got at least 30 to 40 resolutions that are typed exactly the same with just typos in them. And it's going to be a really funny night. This is about building staff capacity. That's what that joke is. We need more people there. So what we're going to do, we're going to say goodnight tonight. We're going to see you on Monday, and we're going to have a house party show on Saturday after convention. There is a Sunday on convention. We'll probably do another one then, but on Saturday for sure. Blake, DJ, Suze, do you guys want to come back on Saturday night next week?
I'll be there.
I'll be there. Just let me know the time. If it works, it always depends on the timing.
It'll be, I'm not sure, at least 7 p.m. Eastern.
So that would be 5 p.m. Oh, yeah. It's always easier for me, I think, because yours folks are a bit later. Yeah.
I'll be there with my party lights.
Oh, yeah.
There we go.
I'll see if I can get a funky background or something going in. Maybe I'll get I'll rebrand as CBC and everyone can come on. Live from the It'd be live on location, the CBC coverage of the 2021 virtual NDP convention.
Anyways, I want to see that.
But yeah, we're definitely going to do something on the Saturday. We're here on the Monday talking about resolutions. Until then, thank you all so much for coming. I'm going to press the end broadcast button. Blake Desjarlais, Dhananjai?
Yeah. I go by DJ, but Dhananjai is fine too. Yeah.
Your Twitter says a different name than DJ. I want to make sure I'm not being an idiot. But DJ Kholi and Suze Morrison, Toronto Centre. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will see you on Monday night.